I used to believe marriage was a shelter, for walls strong enough to keep out the storms of the world. When I married her, I truly thought we had built that shelter together, brick by brick, promise by promise. I remember standing beside her on our wedding day, the lights warm, the air filled with blessings, and my heart loud with hope. Everyone said we looked perfect, and I believed them, because I felt perfect too, chosen, trusted, complete. She smiled at me in a way that made me feel like the luckiest man alive. Her hand in mine felt steady, reassuring. I promised her everything I had, my loyalty, my strength, my future. I wasn't rich, but I was honest. I didn't have power, but I had love. And I thought love would be enough. In the early days, our life was simple but full. We lived in a small place with thin walls and noisy neighbors, but none of that mattered. We laughed at the smallest things: burnt food, old movies, rainy evenings when the electricity went out, and we lit candles like it was a celebration. She would lean her head on my shoulder, and I would think, this is it. This is home. I worked long hours back then. Every morning, I left before sunrise, telling myself that every step I took was for us. Every tired bone in my body was an investment in our future. I imagined a bigger house, a safer life, a smile on her face that would never fade. When I came home exhausted, she would sometimes already be asleep. I would watch her breathe and feel proud. Proud that I was the man responsible for her peace. She used to ask me about my day, and I would tell her everything, even the boring details. She listened, at least I thought she did. She would nod, smile, and say she believed in me. Those words meant more to me than she ever knew. They made me feel seen. They made me feel worthy. When our child was born, I felt a new kind of love, something fierce and terrifying. Holding that tiny life in my arms, I promised silently that I would never let anything harm this family. My wife looked at me with tired eyes and said, "We did it." I believed that too. I believed we were a team. For a while we were. But belief can be dangerous when it blinds you. Slowly, things began to change. Not all at once. No, betrayal rarely arrives loudly. It comes quietly, like dust settling where you don't notice until everything feels heavy. She became distant. Not cold, just elsewhere. Her smiles didn't reach her eyes anymore. Her phone became something she guarded, something she turned face down whenever I entered the room. I told myself I was imagining things. After all, life was stressful. A new child. Bills. Responsibilities. I convinced myself that love naturally becomes quieter, more mature. I didn't question it. I didn't want to. Sometimes she would mention her past, casually, almost innocently. A name would slip out, followed by a quick laugh, as if it meant nothing. Her first love. She said it like it was a closed chapter, a story already finished. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I was her husband. I was the man she chose. I never checked her phone. Never asked where she went when she stayed out late. Trust, I thought, was the foundation of marriage. And I was proud of my trust. I wore it like a badge of honor, not realizing it was also the blindfold over my eyes. There were nights when she sat beside me but felt miles away. Her body was present, but her mind was elsewhere. I would talk about plans, our child's future, school, dreams, and she would respond with vague agreement. "We'll see," she'd say. "Inshallah." I thought she was just tired. Looking back now, I realize how deeply I wanted to believe in us. Belief is comforting. It keeps you warm even when the truth is cold. I loved her in the way that makes a man vulnerable. I loved her without backup plans, without conditions. I defended her even when people hinted that something was wrong. "She's just stressed," I would say. "She's a good woman." And I meant it. I needed it to be true. Our marriage, in my eyes, was sacred. I believed that once two people stand together and make promises, the world becomes secondary. I believed that love meant choosing each other every day, even on the days when it was hard. What I didn't understand then was that belief alone cannot hold a marriage together if only one person is believing. There were small moments that should have warned me. The way she stopped sharing her worries. The way she no longer asked about mine. The way silence grew between us, not peaceful, but heavy. Still, I stayed hopeful. I thought love was patient. I thought endurance was strength. I remember one evening clearly. Our child was asleep, and we were sitting in the dim light of the room. I reached for her hand, and she let me, but her grip was loose, distracted. I asked her if she was happy. She paused before answering. Just for a second. But that second changed everything, though I didn't realize it yet. "Yes," she said. But it sounded rehearsed. I smiled and accepted it, because accepting it was easier than digging deeper. because digging deeper might have forced me to face a truth I wasn't ready to see. At that time, I still believed in the marriage I had built in my mind. A marriage where loyalty was mutual, where love was enough, where I was not alone, even when the world was heavy. I believed she would stand by me if things ever fell apart. I believed wrong. But in chapter 1 of my story, before the streets, before the sickness, before the night that broke everything, I was just a man who loved his wife. A man who trusted her completely. A man who believed that the vows we made were unbreakable. And that belief was the beginning of my end. It started with something so small that no one took it seriously. Not even me. A mild fever, a little cough, restless nights where our child cried more than usual. Every parent goes through it, people said. It's just the weather. Kids get sick all the time. I nodded and believed them, because believing it was harmless felt easier than imagining something worse. At first, I treated it like a temporary storm. I brought medicines on my way home from work, pressed my palm against my child's forehead, whispered prayers under my breath. My wife watched quietly from a distance, scrolling through her phone, occasionally asking, "Is the fever down?" Her concern sounded correct, appropriate, but it didn't feel deep. I ignored that feeling too. Days passed, and the fever didn't fully leave. Some mornings our child looked fine, smiling weakly, trying to play. Other days, the weakness returned like a shadow. The appetite disappeared. Sleep became broken. I started waking up at night just to listen, counting breaths, afraid of silence. That's when fear entered my life properly. Not loud, not dramatic, just a constant tightness in my chest that refused to go away. We took our child to the local clinic. The doctor gave common medicines and told us to wait. "Nothing serious," he said, barely looking up from his notes. I wanted to trust him. I needed to trust him. My wife nodded, already ready to leave. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. As the weeks went on, our child's condition worsened. Weight dropped. Eyes lost their shine. Even crying sounded weak now, like the body was too tired to express pain properly. I started taking days off work, which we couldn't afford, but I didn't care. Money felt meaningless when my child looked at me with tired eyes, silently asking for help. Hospitals became familiar places. The smell of disinfectant, the echo of footsteps in long corridors, the sound of names being called. These things began to feel like part of my life. I filled forms, waited in lines, argued with receptionists, begged doctors to look again. My wife came sometimes. Other times she said she was busy. "You handle it better," she told me once. "You're stronger in these situations." I didn't feel strong. I felt desperate. At night, I would hold our child close, feeling the small body tremble with fever. I whispered stories, promises I wasn't sure I could keep. "You'll be fine," I said again and again, as if repetition could make it true. Sometimes my child would smile faintly, and that smile kept me alive. But slowly, another truth was forming, one I tried hard to ignore. I was alone in this fight. My wife's distance grew more visible during our child's illness. She complained about hospital expenses, about how exhausting everything was. "My life has become nothing but sickness and stress," she said once, rubbing her temples. I wanted to scream that this wasn't about her life. It was about our child's life. But I stayed quiet. Conflict felt dangerous when everything else was already falling apart. Sometimes, while I sat beside the hospital bed, I noticed her texting someone, smiling at her screen. I told myself it was work, or a friend, or family. Anything except the truth my heart was slowly recognizing. Doctors finally suggested more tests. Words like complications and infection entered the conversation. They spoke carefully, avoiding eye contact, which scared me more than harsh honesty ever could. I signed papers with shaking hands, watching my child disappear behind hospital doors, feeling helpless in a way I had never felt before. Those were the nights when I truly learned what prayer meant. Not the kind spoken out loud for others to hear, but the kind whispered in darkness, filled with fear and bargaining. "Take anything from me," I begged God silently. "Just spare my child." My wife prayed too, at least she said she did. But her prayers felt distant, like a duty rather than desperation. She would leave early, say she couldn't handle the hospital environment. "It makes me anxious," she said. I wanted to tell her that anxiety was a luxury. That real fear is sitting beside a hospital bed, wondering if your child will wake up. Bills started piling up. I borrowed money, sold small things, skipped meals. None of it mattered as long as there was a chance to save my child. I slept on cold chairs, on floors, anywhere near that bed. Every beep of the machines made my heart jump. During all this, my marriage quietly cracked. We stopped talking about us. There was only logistics now, medicines, appointments, money. Emotional support vanished. Sometimes I looked at her and felt like I was talking to a stranger who happened to share my last name. One night, after a long day at the hospital, I asked her to stay. "Please," I said. "Just tonight." She hesitated, checked her phone, and said she couldn't. "I have something important." Something important. I watched her leave while I stayed behind with our sick child, and in that moment, a terrible realization settled in my chest. Whatever was pulling her away was stronger than the bond holding us together. Still, I didn't accuse her. I didn't question her loyalty. I was too focused on survival, my child's and my own. I told myself I could deal with everything else later. But illness has a way of revealing truth. It strips life down to essentials. And in that stripped-down world, I saw clearly who stayed and who drifted away. Our child's illness wasn't just attacking a small, fragile body. It was exposing the weakness in my marriage. It was testing promises made in comfort, now broken under pressure. By the end of that chapter of my life, I was no longer just a husband or a father. I was a man learning, painfully, that love spoken easily is not the same as love proven in crisis. And the worst part, the real suffering had only just begun. There are nights that divide your life into before and after. You don't recognize them when they arrive. They look ordinary, too quiet, too familiar. But once they pass, nothing is ever the same again. That night began like many others during our child's illness, with exhaustion clinging to my bones and fear sitting heavy in my chest. The doctor had discharged us earlier that day, saying we could manage things at home for now. But be careful, he warned. If the fever spikes again, come back immediately. I nodded, memorizing every word, every instruction, as if my attention alone could protect my child. Our child was weak, barely eating, eyes dull with fatigue. I carried that small body in my arms, feeling how light it had become, and something inside me broke quietly. At home, I laid my child down gently and checked the temperature again and again, praying for the numbers to stay low. My wife was restless that evening. She kept checking the time, fixing her hair, changing clothes as if she were preparing for something important. I noticed it, of course, but I didn't connect the dots. I was too tired, too consumed by worry. "I need to go out tonight," she said casually, as if she were asking for salt at the table. I looked up, confused. "Go out? Now?" "There's a birthday," she replied. "An old friend." Something about the way she said old friend made my stomach tighten. "Tonight?" I asked again, my voice lower now. "Our child isn't well." She sighed, clearly irritated. "I've been stuck in this house and hospital for weeks. I just need a break." "A break?" I looked at our child, sleeping restlessly, then back at her. "Can it wait?" I asked softly. "Just for tonight?" She hesitated. Just for a moment. And in that hesitation, I felt the truth hovering between us, unspoken but powerful. "No," she said. "It's important. Important." I wanted to argue. I wanted to beg. I wanted to shout that this fragile life struggling to breathe properly, was important. But the words stuck in my throat. I was too tired to fight, too broken to demand. "Whose birthday is it?" I asked. She avoided my eyes. "Someone from before. My first love." The words hit me harder than I expected. My first instinct was disbelief. Then denial. Then a slow, burning realization. "You're going to him?" I asked. "It's just a birthday," she snapped. "Don't make it something else." But it already was something else. She knew it. I knew it. I looked at her for a long moment, searching for doubt, for guilt, for anything that suggested she might change her mind. I found nothing. Her decision was already made. "Please," I said quietly. "Just stay tonight." She picked up her bag. "You're being dramatic." And with that, she walked out the door. The sound of it closing behind her echoed through the house like a final answer. I sat there for a while, stunned, listening to the silence she left behind. Then I heard a small cough from the other room, weak and desperate. I rushed to my child's side, pushing everything else out of my mind. Hours passed slowly. The fever rose again. I tried cooling the body, giving medicine, whispering prayers that felt heavier with every repetition. My phone stayed silent. No message. No call. Not even a simple, "How is the child?" Sometime around midnight, my child's breathing became uneven. Panic rushed through me like fire. I wrapped my child in a blanket, grabbed the few things we needed, and stepped out into the night. I called her. No answer. I called again. Nothing. The streets were quieter than usual, lights dim, air cold. Every step felt unreal, like I was walking through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I flagged down a rickshaw, holding my child close, begging the driver to hurry. At the hospital, they took us in again. Nurses moved quickly, doctors asked questions, machines beeped. I answered everything, my voice shaking, my hands numb. All the while, one thought kept repeating in my mind. She chose him. Between tests and waiting rooms, I checked my phone. Still nothing. But then I saw photos online. Mutual friends had posted them. Smiling faces. Cake. Candles. And there she was, standing beside him, laughing. Laughing. While my child struggled to breathe. Something inside me collapsed completely in that moment. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a deep, irreversible break. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt empty, like someone had scooped out everything that mattered and left behind a hollow shell. She finally called hours later. "I'm busy," she said before I could speak. "Why are you calling so much?" "Our child is in the hospital," I replied, my voice flat. There was a pause. Music played faintly in the background. "Oh," she said. Again. "I'll come later," she added. "Don't ruin my mood right now." The line went dead. That was the night she chose him. Not just by being with him, but by deciding that our child's pain and my desperation mattered less than her happiness. Less than nostalgia. Less than a past she claimed was over. I sat beside the hospital bed until morning, watching my child fight silently, bravely. In those long hours, I thought about every promise she and I had made. Every vow. Every time I defended her, trusted her, believed in her. And one by one, those memories lost their meaning. When dawn came, pale and cold, I realized something terrifyingly clear. I was no longer a husband in a marriage. I was a single man holding together what little remained of his family. That night didn't just reveal her choice. It revealed mine too. I chose my child, even if it meant standing alone in the dark. The hospital released us again, just before dawn. Not because my child was better, but because there was nothing more they could do without money we didn't have. The doctor avoided my eyes as he spoke, his voice careful, measured. "Keep the child warm. Monitor the breathing. If it worsens, bring them back immediately." I nodded like a man who still had options. Outside, the city was waking up slowly. Shops were closed, streets half empty, the sky a dull gray that matched the weight in my chest. I wrapped my child tighter in the thin blanket I had brought from home. The small body felt frighteningly light, like it could disappear if I loosened my grip. I called my wife again. No answer. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a deep, hollow exhaustion. Anger requires energy. I had none left. The rickshaw drivers refused to take us at first. Too far. Too early. Find someone else. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just kept walking, holding my child close, whispering words that sounded more like apologies than comfort. "I'm here," I said again and again. "I'm here." The streets felt colder than usual. Not just the air, but the way the world seemed indifferent to the two of us moving through it. People passed by, wrapped in their own lives, their own worries. No one noticed the man with tired eyes and a sick child pressed against his chest. By the time the sun rose fully, my arms were shaking from fatigue. I sat down on the edge of the sidewalk, resting my back against a wall. I checked my child's face. Pale. Too still. Fear clawed at my throat. I tried calling relatives. Some phones rang unanswered. Others offered sympathy but no solutions. "We'll pray," they said. "Inshallah things will improve." Prayer is powerful, but it doesn't buy medicine, and it doesn't warm a child shivering in your arms. I checked my wallet. Almost empty. That's when reality finally stopped being something I could ignore. I couldn't go home. Home was far, and even if I reached it, there was no money for treatment, no warmth strong enough to fight what was happening. And there was no wife waiting with concern or support. Just silence. So I stayed where I was. On the street. I moved closer to a closed shop, away from the wind. I sat on the cold ground, pulling the blanket over both of us, trying to create warmth with my own body. My legs ached. My head throbbed. Hunger twisted my stomach, but it felt irrelevant. All that mattered was the fragile life in my arms. I talked to my child softly, even when there was no response. I told stories about better days. About how strong they were. About how everything would be okay, even though I no longer believed it myself. "Just hold on," I whispered. Please. Time stretched strangely on the street. Minutes felt like hours. The city grew louder, buses passing, vendors setting up stalls, life continuing as if nothing extraordinary was happening. As if a man wasn't slowly falling apart right there on the pavement. I watched couples walk by together. Families holding hands. Children laughing. Every sound felt distant, unreal. I felt like I had slipped out of the world everyone else was living in. At one point, my phone buzzed. A message from my wife. Where are you? Just that. No concern. No urgency. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. With our child, I typed. On the street. There was no response. The cold crept deeper as the day went on. My hands grew numb. I kept switching positions, trying to keep circulation going, but my body was giving up slowly. My child's breathing was shallow now, barely noticeable. Panic surged again, sharper than before. I stood up suddenly, dizzy, and started walking aimlessly, hoping movement would help. Every step felt heavy, like my feet were sinking into the ground. I begged strangers for help. Some looked away. Some said they had nothing. A few offered coins. I thanked them, even though I knew it wasn't enough. Humiliation burned inside me, but pride had died long ago. Pride doesn't matter when your child is slipping away. At some point, my vision blurred. The street tilted. I leaned against a wall, sliding down slowly, careful not to drop the small body I held so tightly. My chest hurt. Breathing became difficult. I realized then that I was reaching my limit. My body had been running on fear and love for too long. Hunger, cold, stress, they were collecting their debt. I sat there on the cold street, surrounded by noise and people, yet completely alone. That loneliness was worse than the cold. Not because there was no one around, but because the one person who should have been there chose not to be. I thought of my wife, of the birthday lights, the music, the laughter, of how easily she had walked away from us. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger toward her. I felt clarity. She was gone long before that night. The street was quiet inside my head now. My thoughts slowed. I focused only on the warmth of my child against my chest, on the faint rise and fall of breathing. If this is the end, I thought, then let me be here. Let me be here holding my child. Let me not leave them alone. I don't know how long I sat there. Time stopped making sense. I remember the cold, the weight, the silence inside me growing deeper. And I remember one final, devastating truth settling in my heart. A man can survive betrayal. A man can survive poverty. But no man should ever have to choose between dignity and his child's life, alone on a cold street, while the person who promised to stand beside him celebrates somewhere warm. That street wasn't just where my body rested. It was where my faith in everything finally froze. Death does not always arrive with drama. Sometimes it comes quietly, almost gently, like a hand placed over your mouth while the world keeps moving. That's how it felt that day, slow, unnoticed, wrapped in silence. I don't remember falling. I remember slipping, as if my body simply decided it had carried enough weight for one lifetime. The cold street pressed against my back. The noise of the city faded into something distant and muffled, like I was underwater. My arms tightened instinctively around my child, even as my strength drained away. I was afraid of letting go. Not of dying, but of what would happen to my child if I did. My vision darkened at the edges. Faces passed above me, blurred shapes, shadows that didn't stop for long. Someone said something. I couldn't make out the words. Another voice asked if I was drunk. I wanted to scream that I was a father, not a beggar, not a drunk, not invisible, but my mouth wouldn't obey. Silence wrapped around me. In that silence, memories came rushing in, not in order, not neatly, but all at once. My wedding day. My child's first cry. Evenings when I thought my life was ordinary and therefore safe. I wondered how something that began with so much hope could end on a pavement unnoticed. I felt my child shift weakly against my chest. That movement brought me back with a jolt of terror. I forced my eyes open, blinking against the light. "I'm here," I tried to say. It came out as a breath. I don't know how long I lay there before someone finally called for help. An ambulance. Sirens. Bright lights that hurt my eyes. Hands pulling us apart. "No." I tried to protest as they lifted my child from my arms. Panic surged through me, sudden and sharp. "Please stay." They didn't understand my words, but they understood the situation. My child was rushed one way. I was taken another. That separation was the most painful moment of all. In the ambulance, The world narrowed to beeping sounds and flashing lights. I felt myself fading, not dramatically, but steadily, like a candle burning out. I thought of my wife then. Not with anger. Not with love. With disbelief. I wondered if she knew. If she would come if someone told her. If, in this moment, she would finally choose us. At the hospital, everything moved quickly around me. Doctors. Nurses. Questions I couldn't answer. My body felt heavy, unresponsive, like it belonged to someone else. They spoke words I caught only pieces of: hypothermia, severe exhaustion, dehydration. I wanted to ask about my child. I couldn't. Darkness closed in again, thicker this time. And somewhere in that darkness, something inside me broke completely. Not with pain, but with surrender. If this was death, I thought, then at least it would be quiet. When I woke again, I wasn't sure where I was. White ceiling. Soft hum of machines. My throat burned. My body ached in ways I didn't know how to name. For a brief moment, hope flared. I was alive. The first word I tried to say was my child's name. Nothing came out. A nurse noticed me stir and came closer. She checked the monitors, smiled gently. "You're awake," she said. "My child," I whispered, barely audible. Her smile faded. She didn't answer immediately. That pause, just like my wife's pause when I asked if she was happy, told me everything before the words came. "We did everything we could," she said softly. The room felt too small. The air too thick. My heart pounded painfully as if it were trying to escape my chest. "No," I said. "No, please." Tears came then, not dramatic sobs, but silent streams that soaked into the pillow. I turned my face away, ashamed of my weakness, even though there was nothing left to be strong for. My child was gone. Just like that. The world did not end. The machines kept humming. People kept walking past the door. Somewhere outside, cars moved, lives continued. The unfairness of it was unbearable. I asked about my wife. The nurse hesitated again. "We tried calling the number you gave," she said. No response. No response. That was betrayal in its purest form. Not an argument, not a confession, not even a cruel word. Just silence. Hours passed. Or maybe days. Time lost its meaning. People came and went. Papers were signed. Procedures followed. Everything felt mechanical, unreal. I moved through it like a ghost. When my wife finally came, it was too late. She walked into the room slowly, carefully, as if approaching something fragile. Her eyes went to the bed, to the machines, to me. Confusion crossed her face first. Then irritation. "Why didn't you tell me it was this serious?" she asked. That question shattered whatever remained of my heart. I looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time without love blurring my vision. I saw someone unfamiliar. Someone distant. Someone who had already left long before death ever arrived. "I did," I said quietly. "You just didn't listen." She said nothing. Silence again. I told her then. About the street. The cold. The begging. The moment our child stopped breathing properly. The ambulance. The separation. Her face changed, but not the way I had imagined. There was shock. Discomfort. Maybe even guilt. But there was no collapse. No scream. No tears. She sat down slowly and covered her face with her hands. "I didn't think," she began. I stopped her. "Thinking ends when love ends," I said. "You chose something else." She didn't deny it. That was the final betrayal. Not the birthday, not the absence, not even the silence. It was the acceptance. After she left, the room felt lighter, as if a weight had finally been removed. Pain remained, but clarity came with it. Death had visited us that day. It took my child. It almost took me. But betrayal? Betrayal had been there long before, quiet, patient, waiting for the moment when it could no longer be ignored. And silence. Silence was what remained when everything else was stripped away. Silence where my child's laughter should have been. Silence where my wife's love once lived. Silence that would follow me forever. That chapter of my life ended not with words, not with justice, not with comfort, but with a truth so heavy it reshaped me completely. Some people don't kill you with cruelty. They kill you by choosing not to care. And once that silence settles in, nothing is ever the same again. They say truth comes out eventually. What they don't tell you is that sometimes it comes too late. After apologies no longer heal, after tears mean nothing, after graves are already sealed. After my child's death, the world treated me differently. People spoke softly around me, as if I might shatter with the wrong word. Some avoided my eyes altogether. Others offered condolences that sounded rehearsed, empty. Allah knows best, they said. Be patient. I nodded, because there was nothing else to do. Inside, I was already buried. The days that followed blurred together. Funeral arrangements. Paperwork. A tiny grave that felt too small to hold such a big piece of my soul. I stood there, watching Earth cover what I loved most in this world, and I felt something inside me go numb. My wife stood at a distance during the burial. Not beside me. Not holding my hand. Just watching. When the final prayer ended, people came to comfort her. They told her to be strong. No one told me anything. At night, when everything was quiet, the truth began to surface. Not loudly, not dramatically, but piece by piece, like bones rising through the soil after a storm. Messages started coming in. Not to me at first, but about her. Friends spoke carefully, as if afraid of hurting me, but the truth doesn't soften itself just because you're already broken. Someone mentioned seeing her often with him. Not just recently, but for months. Another said the birthday wasn't a coincidence. It was planned long before our child fell sick. I listened without reacting. Then I found the messages myself. Her phone lay on the table one evening, buzzing repeatedly. I hadn't checked it in years. Trust, I once believed, meant not looking. But trust had already been murdered. What remained was only truth. I picked it up. There it was. Everything. Late-night conversations. Plans. Jokes. Complaints about me. About how tired she was of this life. About how trapped she felt. About how she wished things had turned out differently. About how she still loved him. One message, sent while I was on the street with our dying child, read, "I wish tonight could last forever." I sat down slowly, my hands shaking, not with anger, but with a strange calm. It was as if my heart had finally accepted what my mind had refused for so long. She hadn't just chosen him that night. She had been choosing him for a long time. The truth after the grave is cruel in a way nothing else is. Because now there was no confrontation that could change anything. No argument that could undo the past. No apology that could bring my child back. Only understanding. And understanding hurts more than ignorance ever did. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. She didn't scream or accuse. She just looked tired, relieved almost. "I never meant for this to happen," she said quietly. "That's the problem," I replied. "You meant for everything else to happen." She cried then. Real tears this time. She said she felt lonely. That marriage changed her. That motherhood wasn't what she expected. That she felt like she lost herself. I listened. Not because I cared, but because I needed to hear how someone justifies abandoning their own child. "You didn't lose yourself," I said. "You gave yourself away." She tried to reach for my hand. I pulled back. That moment, small, simple, was the end of whatever bond still existed between us. After that, I stopped asking why. Why is a question that assumes the answer will help. It doesn't. The truth was enough. The truth was that love cannot survive where responsibility is absent. That vows mean nothing if they collapse under inconvenience. That betrayal isn't always loud. It's often quiet, smiling, and dressed as happiness. I began visiting the grave often. Not because it brought peace, but because it reminded me of who I had been and who I could never be again. I talked there sometimes. Not to God. To my child. I tried, I would say. I swear I tried. And for the first time, I believed myself. People expect you to move on after death. They use that phrase casually, as if grief were a place you pass through rather than a place you live in forever. But moving on implies leaving something behind. I couldn't. What I could do was move forward, carrying the truth with me instead of running from it. I left that house. Left the memories that suffocated me. Left the woman who chose her past over her present. There was no dramatic goodbye. No shouting. No closure scene. Closure is a luxury for people who weren't destroyed. I rebuilt my life slowly, not with hope, but with honesty. I worked. I slept. I breathed. Some days were unbearable. Others were merely empty. But each day I survived. And survival became my quiet rebellion against everything that tried to end me. The truth after the grave changed me. It stripped away illusions I once called faith. It taught me that love must be proven, not promised. That absence during suffering is the loudest confession of all. I no longer believe marriage is a shelter. I believe it is a responsibility. And when that responsibility is abandoned, the damage echoes far beyond two people. Sometimes late at night, I still think of that street. The cold. The silence. The weight of my child in my arms. Those memories will never leave me. But neither will the truth. And that truth, painful as it is, gave me something unexpected. Freedom. Freedom from guilt that was never mine. Freedom from love that demanded my sacrifice, but offered none in return. Freedom from believing that endurance equals loyalty. The grave took my child. Betrayal nearly took my life. But truth was what finally brought me back from the dead.